I wouldn't say that I'm the best Mario Kart player, but I'm very familiar with the game. For those of you who don't know, Mario Kart is a little indie kart racing game series that hasn't seen breakout success yet, but it has a bit of a cult following. Jokes aside, Mario Kart is and has always been a mainstay of every Nintendo console's library since the Super Nintendo. The latest installment, 8 Deluxe, is really good. I mean, really, really good. The characters are so expressive, the graphics are downright beautiful, and it has the first soundtrack with live instrumentation in any Mario Kart game, with a big band jazz feel that just makes me so happy. One of the most important parts of any Mario Kart game, though, are the tracks. A Mario Kart game without good tracks is like a cheeseburger with no patty. For it to be fun and interesting, a Mario Kart track has to have good design, striking a balance between challenge and fun by utilizing obstacles and turns. It also has to have striking aesthetics, using beautiful backgrounds and fun props to build a great visual presence, as well as a catchy song for background music. If it tells you anything about how long it took to make this video, I started writing the script around the time the second DLC pack was released, and now as I'm recording, they're about to drop Wave 4. So with the next DLC pack just over the horizon, what better time to look back at the original 48 and see how they all stack up? Let's not waste any more time, or this video is going to be like 2 hours long. Let's just get right into the ranking. There is not a single thing in this world that I hate more than Grumble Volcano. You might think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. Parts of this track make me feel like it was designed to torture me specifically. Heaven forbid you end up in one of these sections at the wrong time, or you have to wait for the whole thing to get lowered into lava just because you can't turn out of the way to end the pain yourself. That is the definition of injustice. And if it's not absolutely unfair, it's just boring. I'm sorry, but molten rock and caves are not interesting design elements, especially when it's done like this. There's barely any obstacles on the track other than the falling track itself, and none of the obstacles that are there, or the turns for that matter, are interesting in the slightest. Also, the backgrounds are just too dark, and it might just be a Pavlovian response from the thought of playing this track, but the music just gives me anxiety. It's like they want you to associate this track with pain. To the one person whose favorite track is Grumble Volcano, and yes, I know you exist somewhere in this forsaken world. I mean, no offense to you personally, but the only reason this is your favorite is because it reminds you of playing Mario Kart Wii as a kid and not having any responsibilities. You're just chasing that feeling because you haven't felt alive since 2009, you're tired of the way the world has treated you, you feel like though you have the world on your shoulders and this is your one safe space where you can decompress, forget about the nagging of the world and feel like a kid again. Well, guess what? I'm tearing down your safe space. Your safe space sucks. You're probably surprised that I ranked Music Park this low. Heck, I am too. I used to really like this track, but looking back on it, I'm just really disappointed with it. It has so much potential, and it uses some of it, but it ends up falling so short, and that's why it's so low. It could have been great, I wanted it to be great, but it's just eh. For example, I like the way that the piano plays along with the music when you drive on it, but the song is just pretty bland, especially when compared to the stellar soundtrack of some of the other tracks, so it doesn't make it that much more interesting. I like the musical props in some of the areas of the track, but the background is literally just space, which seems like an easy way out to me. Why not make it something more unique to the track, like a music room or a sea of other instruments? Also, you couldn't come up with a better prop for the midsection than a bouncing music note? All the other props are actual instruments, which makes this guy feel pretty out of place. The track design itself isn't very interesting at all, and honestly it could fit a different theme just as well, other than the piano and xylophone parts obviously. I never feel satisfied when I finish a race on this track. It's like if this section of the video ended without a proper conclusion. I might be going back into GV rant territory with this, but I think that if this track is your favorite, you probably have the mental capacity of a 4-year-old. Really the only thing this track has going for it is how colorful it is, and maybe the music. This track is freaking boring. Every turn is a 90-degree corner, there's no shortcuts, and aside from some hills, the background is just space again. The additions to this track in 8 are pretty pathetic as well. I'm sorry, but Rainbow Thwomps are just not that interesting or really fitting to this track at all. So yeah, this track's not that good. Definitely the worst Rainbow Road, and to me it just seems like an odd addition. Then again, there aren't really that many memorable tracks from Super anyways, and at that point, why even bother remaking any tracks from it in the first place? I moved the two Mario circuits around several times in the making of this list. Every Mario Kart game has a track like this, and for some reason the makers of 8 decided to remake the one from Super Circuit. Bizarre choice both for a track and a game to pick the track from. I mean, I guess it's an alright track, but like most Mario circuits, this track and the other Mario circuit lack a distinct visual style. Oh yeah, I guess I almost forgot to mention, there's 2 tracks in this game called Mario Circuit, which just kind of adds to the confusion because I mix up these tracks all the time. Also, it's barely Mario themed at all. This track is about 5% Mario, 95% Circuit. It has one interesting shortcut, which you can't really say about the other one. Also, I think that this race part is pretty neat, and it's always nice to see some Super Circuit representation. Hearing that music again for the first time was a breath of fresh air. Loved that game as a kid. Definitely not the worst track in the game, but not one I go back to all that often. Yeah, the desert, or I guess heat-themed stages in this game are obviously not the best. This one doesn't infuriate me like Grumble Volcano, but it's just pretty uninteresting. Some might say that makes it even worse, but I'm not going to give any credit at all to that stage, whose name I will not speak again. This track has a few redeeming qualities at least. It has interesting ideas like alternate paths, a sand geyser, and a couple of obstacles like this one ramp, but it doesn't really utilize them in any interesting way. The background is, well, a desert, so it's not really that interesting, and it doesn't use any good props other than this boat, which is pretty neat. The song is pretty forgettable too. In fact, I'm struggling to remember how it goes as I write this. It's not torture, but I wouldn't pick it over most of the other tracks on this list. Okay, the fact that I'm salty about the names being the same may have influenced how low this track is on the list, but come on, they couldn't have thought of any other name for the new Mario circuit? Here, I can think of 5 just off the top of my head. Mario Motorway, Plumber's Pass, Luigi's Brother Lane, okay, I'm out of ideas, but still. As far as the track itself, it does the job, I guess, but it's one of the most forgettable tracks in the game. What makes it even worse is, again, there's another track called Mario Circuit in the same game, and the two are so easy to confuse with each other because of their lack of a distinct visual style. Yeah, it looks pretty, gorgeous even, but you could say that about pretty much any track in the game. It's about as generic Mario-themed track as this game gets. The best way I can describe it is, you know those fan renders people made in 2012 in like Unreal Engine that are like, this is what Mario Kart is going to look like in 10 years? The track is always some derivative racetrack that looks really good but doesn't have much of its own personality. Breaking news, Nintendo finally hired him! Your comments really did work! The melody is a variation of the main theme of the game. It's a lot like the one from Mario Kart Stadium, but stripped back to a much simpler soft rock style song, which is, passable. And the track design is okay, but there are no alternate paths, and the zero graph sections are pretty understated in my opinion. In fact, I think the best angle of it that you get is from the other side. I did move this track up a few spots from my original placement though, because after looking at it more closely, the track looks a whole lot prettier than I originally gave it credit for, and it has just enough Mario spice to make it more unique than some of the others. I'll be completely honest, when I started making this ranking, I completely forgot this track was in the game. On paper, it's a pretty neat idea. A subway station has so much potential to be a great Mario Kart track, and yes, it has a fairly striking visual style, but honestly it doesn't do that much with it. Nevertheless, it's still a fairly competent track. In fact, it's really challenging, maybe a bit too much so. It has a few alternate paths which are pretty neat. Trying to avoid the subway is a fun challenge. Something I just realized while writing this and listening to the soundtrack, there's a subtle change in the music when you go into the tunnel and the bass plays the underground theme from Super Mario Bros. Nice touch. And now we have reached the point of complete indifference. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this one. I don't really like it, I don't really hate it. I didn't grow up with Double Dash, so I don't really have any nostalgic connection with it, and I wasn't super hyped to see it come back. For me, it's just kind of there to fill in the gap of snow-themed tracks in the game. The music's nice, I'll say that. It's also really pretty. I love the Double Dash visual style, and I'll be going into more depth on it when we get into some of the other GameCube tracks. I also like how the track separates into above and underground sections, but it does take away from some of the challenge of avoiding the holes. So yeah, not the best and not the worst, but if we're only at number 41 and all the below average tracks are out of the way, I think that says something about the overall quality of the game. Another one I don't really have a strong opinion on. In fact, I hold it to pretty much the same regard as Sherbet Land. I only really have this one placed higher because I prefer warm to cold weather. I actually did have Mario Kart DS when I was younger, but I'm not really as nostalgic for it as I am for Super Circuit. The beach setting is pretty nice, and the little sand islands are satisfying to boost off of, but much like Sherbet Land, it doesn't really stick out to me, and there are plenty of other stages from DS that I think would have been much better options to bring back. Finally, a desert stage I don't mind. I might not have played Double Dash as a kid, but one thing I can attest to is that it's got its visuals down to a T. Everything in this track, and all the GameCube stages for that matter, are so colorful but not oversaturated. I'm glad Nintendo didn't change the visual style too much on these tracks and let their art style shine. They really stand out among the crowd. As far as DDD specifically, it's an alright desert stage. Each section of track is distinct. I like the sand funnel near the middle. There's plenty of chances for jump boosts and shortcuts, and the track is actually dynamic in that obstacles like the pokies and stone pillars can fall to create arches and ramps respectively. However, despite all these positives, it is in fact a desert stage, so the background is pretty boring and I'm not a big fan of the music. Overall, it's definitely not the worst of the lineup. In fact, it's pretty good, it's just not one I'm itching to go back to all the time. This track is the first on the list that I would go out of my way to pick. Some days are just Piranha Plant slide days, you know? This track has plenty of charm to it. I love the plumbing-themed aesthetic and some of the subtle nods to Mario's history. The flowing water is pretty cool, and alternate paths are appreciated as always, although I can never seem to catch this one at the right time. The overall track design also makes this track pretty fun to speed through, except for this little portion where it's easy to fall off the track. Other than that, this one's alright. Nothing too special, just some nice comfort food. I've seen plenty of hate when it comes to this Rainbow Road, and I'd agree that it's definitely not the best one, but I don't think it's all that bad. The space station aesthetic is pretty cool, even though it's a bit too industrial for my liking. Like I said when I talked about the SNES Rainbow Road, I'm not really the biggest fan of tracks with the space background, but I think this one kind of makes it work, especially in the flying segments. You really do feel like you're flying through space on this track. Even though there's not much in the way of alternate paths, the track design here is fairly interesting. I like the part where it splits into two paths, and the bends in the track rarely feel too wide or too narrow. While it might not be as iconic as other Rainbow Roads in the series, it's a perfectly serviceable track that provides the lineup with an interesting sci-fi themed stage. Just maybe not a Rainbow Road. I love amusement park themed stages in video games, and Water Park is definitely an interesting one. For the most part, this track nails it in the aesthetics department. The atmosphere and music are so lively, and the underwater sections are pretty cool, but sometimes the perspective gets in the way and makes it harder to appreciate how intricate the design is. There's a few alternate paths and shortcuts, but nothing too crazy. Much like a real roller coaster, this track kind of feels like it's over before it really begins. I feel like they could have done so much more with its aesthetic quirks. This stage just makes me wish there was a Nintendo theme park. Oh wait, pack your bags, we're going to California! Now we're getting to the tracks which I consider to be pretty good. Oh, Yoshi Valley, you're on the verge of greatness and you went and blew it. You probably already know what I'm getting at if you spent any time playing Mario Kart online. If not, well, we'll discuss that later. For now though, holy crap, this track is cool. Besides being pretty visually distinct, not necessarily in texture but in shape, this track has one of the wackiest looking maps in the whole game, and definitely the catchiest tune of any of the N64 tracks. Well, except for one. The track design here is so creative, it almost makes me wish I could go there in real life and just explore. But now we must talk about the issue. The one gaping hole that keeps this track from joining the ranks of what I would consider the best tracks in the game. Here goes. There's one track that is definitively the fastest way around the whole track. Yeah, you'll notice when you play this track online that the majority of people will go across this specific bridge, and from there it's basically just one straightforward track to get to the end. What's the point of having all of this if there's only one way to really be competitive? I feel super conflicted trying to rank this track because it's a really fun track for casual play, but this one glaring flaw keeps it from being truly great overall. I wish I could rank it higher, but here we are. What a fun little track. Creative theming and prop design, beautiful backgrounds with textures that just make you want to eat up the whole thing. It's the Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of Mario Kart tracks, or maybe a better analogy would be that racing game from Wreck-It Ralph. In fact, this is pretty much just a playable version of that. I feel like it's a bit too saturated, a little bit of an assault on the eyes, but it's not really out of place. The rest of the game is obviously really colorful as well. It just feels like they cranked it up to 11 on this one. Also, the song is one of the catchiest in the game. I catch myself whistling it to myself all the time. I like the shortcut here through the donut and the split path in the 0G section, but other than that, the track design doesn't stand out too crazy much. Well, except for this flying section, which I'm honestly not the biggest fan of. Not one of my absolute favorites, but this is definitely one I would never skip. I've never raced on a track that's made me want to become an Alaskan mountain climber more than this. There's something about this track that kinda reminds me of Arctic exhibits in museums and zoos, which may have affected how I view this track a little, but I mean, you're watching a video about Mario Kart here. Jokes aside, I really like this track's aesthetic. Some might think it's a little bit boring, but even if it is, it does what it sets out to do. It makes you feel like you're racing through the side of an Arctic expedition. That said, the song isn't that memorable, but you can't always get everything you want. I really like the split paths. They split and join in logical sections around the track, and along with the few shortcuts scattered throughout the track, they lend a very few dull moments in the track design. Again, I wouldn't consider it a favorite, but this is one I keep finding myself coming back to. Here's another track that kept getting moved around while I was trying to make my list. I can't decide if I really like this track or if I'm just kind of indifferent to it. So yeah, this track will probably keep moving around in my head even after this video comes out, but for now it's number 32. Like a lot of tracks on this list, there isn't really anything wrong with this track. The track design is fun to zip through, and it's obviously a major glow up from the N64 original. I love all the new additions, like the cherry blossoms, balloons, and bells. Sometimes it can feel like a hodgepodge, but that can lend to it feeling more like a celebration. The song is also a great rendition of the original N64 tracks. Overall, I like this one quite a bit, but it's not really the most original or engaging, so I don't think I have it in me to rank it higher. Guys, Mario Kart Stadium is so slept on, it's a literal crime and you're all going to jail. But for real, what a banger opening to a banger game. I remember when this game first came out, I skipped this one a lot, but that was before I really paid attention to it. You start with hundreds, if not thousands of fans in the audience screaming your name, blinding lights shining in your face and illuminating the path to come. Then you start, and for the first time you see what this game is really capable of. Every turn feels natural, you can almost feel the gravity-defying twists and the wind in your face as you fly through the air. Like many of the tracks before it on the list, this one doesn't have too crazy of a track, but it more than makes up for it with its stellar props and general theming. But what really takes the cake is the score. The sweeping strings and energetic horns help to create a bond between the player and the cart that persists even after you turn the game off. Stunning. It might not have the most creative theme or design, but it's a hell of a time to race through. Now, I know what you're thinking. Cheeseland? Really? Better than Yoshi Valley? Better than Sweet Sweet Canyon? Well, hear me out. Rather hear out the saxophone player who put his whole heart and soul into this solo. For real though, Cheeseland is so underappreciated. I really don't understand the hate around it. It is by far the best desert stage in the game, if you can even call it that, because it is in fact cheese. With enough shortcuts, twists, and turns to keep you on your toes, the already mentioned killer score, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm just a sucker for anything cheese related. Think about it, cheese is like the one food that nobody hates. Okay, besides lactose intolerant people, and vegans. Okay, maybe not everyone loves cheese as much as me, but can I just have my moment, please? Man, can I sound more white? The remade track plays with the cheese theme in some really creative ways. There's little dips in the track that are like little holes in Swiss cheese. Pillars of cheese tower around the level and hold up the banner above the finish line. There's blocks of cheese on the inside of the track that you can go straight through as shortcuts. It's just through and through a really creative track that I tip my hat to. All I'm gonna say is there was a missed opportunity here to pull a Toy Story 2 and have part of the level in a ridiculously over-engineered bagging storage facility. I know a lot of people associate airports with stress and anger and missing flights and TSA and stuff, but I haven't been on a flight since I was 9, so I still think airports are pretty cool. The theming is really good in this track, except for one key issue. I don't really get this section. I know it's there so you can be close to the airplane when it takes off, but it's literally just a metal platform being suspended in the air by some propeller things. Unlike the other props in the track, like this plane and the little vehicle, which I cannot for the life of me remember the name of, this doesn't seem to serve any functional purpose in the world of the game. It's only there for the purpose of it being a Mario Kart track. The song isn't really the greatest, but it does the job, and somehow has kind of an airport feel to it. I can't really describe how, but it does. I really like the track design here. Jumping out of an airport terminal and going through the plane itself is super neat, and I know I dogged on it earlier, but being up close to the plane as it's taking off is a really cool part of the experience. The little shortcut where you can hop through the baggage claim is also really fun. This one is definitely one of the more memorable tracks in the lineup. As a certified mossy cobblestone enjoyer, I really enjoy this track. This track sort of scratches the Indiana Jones style expedition itch of Mario Kart tracks, which is not a sentence I expected to be saying today, but for real, it's super cool to be racing through what feels like some sort of ancient ruin of a Thwomp based culture. The theming in this level is on point. I'm not the biggest fan of the song, but all the props and the background elements and even the track itself lend to an overall experience that feels natural, like this was a world that was really lived in and sat dormant for so many years. The track design isn't the most memorable of the bunch, but it's nothing obscene, and I really like the cave section and how this cog opens up an alternate path. The little shortcuts scattered around the level are pretty cool too. It's just too bad some of the Thwomps were kidnapped and forced to work on SNES Rainbow Road. I had to make a compromise with myself on this one because personally, this is one of my favorite tracks from this game and I don't care what anyone else thinks. Then again, I do care what everyone else thinks, so I need to be a bit more fair than that. The theme in this one is pretty good. It has a waterfall, which I'm a sucker for, and the track design is pretty alright. I like this little part quite a bit, but it doesn't really knock it out of the park in either of those areas. No, this one is up this high because of the song. Seriously, this song is the best, one of my absolute favorites in the soundtrack. It's energetic and vibrant, really giving off that mountain vibe. The instrumentation is perfect, and the build to the climax and then back down to the repeat is absolutely blissful. Oh, and the part where the Shy Guys join in with the rhythm is just perfect. So yeah, while it wouldn't be fair of me to rank it much higher than this, in my heart it's in the top 10. The first of the tie-in tracks on this list, Big Blue, is pretty good. The sheer scale of the track can seem overwhelming at times, especially considering the speed at which you race through it, but it's pretty beautiful, and as I mentioned before, I love waterfalls. In fact, the theming of this level is on point. It feels like one of those really good theme park rides based on a movie, but instead of a theme park, it's Mario Kart, and instead of a movie, it's a game series Nintendo refuses to acknowledge. However, its theming can't really save the fact that it really does feel like it's over before it truly begins. The funny thing is, I can't really put my finger on why. All the pieces are there, it just kind of feels off. Maybe it's the track design, which has its moments but doesn't really keep my interest. This might be a hot take, but I'm not really the biggest fan of the music on this one either. It just doesn't feel as iconic as the other F-Zero track. Big Blue might seem out of place in its place on the list, considering the difference in quality and the themes of the tracks around it, but I think its positives and negatives even out pretty equally. Hey, the name doesn't lie. Besides the double entendre in the name, this track has it all. A spooky aesthetic with ghosts, mysterious water-filled areas, night statues, and a boppin' score. Like always, the split paths and shortcuts, which this track is chock full of, are very appreciated. Also, in my personal opinion, this track has one of the best uses of zero-G in the entire game. Those upside-down sections are just so cool. This track might be the most tastefully thematic of the bunch. I say tastefully because technically Sweet Sweet Canyon and maybe a few others might be more thematic, but they're really in your face about it, whereas Twisted Mansion uses subtler theming, like the architecture of the mansion itself, the choice of carpet, and even the little pathway through the library. The song is really cool. The liner notes say that the synth melody is supposed to evoke the sound of ghosts singing, and it really does give off that vibe if you think about it, especially when combined with the other thematic elements. I'd say this is definitely the sequel that Luigi's Mansion track on DS deserved. Like Shy Guy Falls, the music steals the spotlight on this track. I love how dynamic the music is, changing from section to section, and the Above Water soundtrack just blows the whole thing out of the water, no pun intended. As demonstrated in Cheeseland, I'm a sucker for a good saxophone solo, and the solo in Dolphin Shoals is one of the best I've ever heard. The track has become somewhat famous within jazz circles for the quote-unquote Mario Kart lick, a particular lick in the song which was picked up on by the YouTuber Saxologic. Needless to say, it became one of the most well-known jazz memes, and for good reason. That's not to say the track itself isn't notable. No, this track is full of creativity from start to finish. From the part where you jump through rings to the nearly overwhelming split path section to the part where you literally race on the back of an eel. It might not be the most standout track in the game, but this is definitely one that will be remembered for years to come. Okay, this one's definitely going to be a controversial choice, and I probably put it way too high on the list, but gosh darn, it's just so dang fun. It really encapsulates what doing bumper cars felt like as a kid, frantically crashing into each other with no restraint or regard of what anyone else thought, or what was really going on for that matter. If we're being honest, this track probably shouldn't even be on the list. Yeah, it's a track in the game, but it's just so different from the other tracks. It's a short oval, but that doesn't really matter because 1, you go through it 7 times instead of 3, and 2, the appeal of the track isn't really the design, but rather the interaction with the other players. That's why you start in zero grav. That and the track design are meant to entice you into bumping each other. I also like how the music changes on every lap. That's just a nice touch. This track is a bundle of fun, and if you want to turn it up to 11, try it on 200cc. This is where the tracks I consider to be excellent start, the ones that go above and beyond to deliver a great experience in look, feel, and sound. Donut Plains 3 might seem like an odd pick to start this part of the list off with, but if you think about it, it makes sense. They did a lot with a little here, considering the source material. Like I said when I was talking about SNES Rainbow Road, there aren't really any tracks from Super that stand out as particularly memorable, and yet they took a seemingly random track from that game and made a charming swampy marsh theme track out of it. This track just oozes charm, from the quaint, half-broken wooden bridges to the little castle to the distinctly Mario-flavored hills in the background. The music is brilliantly minimalist, incorporating mainly 3 instruments, a shaker, an acoustic bass, and my personal favorite part, the Wurlitzer organ. It complements the track's bare-bones design with how simple and yet charming it is. I think this track is really overlooked. Next time you boot up Mario Kart, give it a try. You have no idea how hard it was to resist making a Tick-Tock joke for this segment. The theming really carries this track in my opinion, but that doesn't mean that the track design is bad. In fact, the way that the track design fits the theming is one of the main draws of the track. Drifting around the face of a giant clock and using the hands as ramps is absolute genius, and the uses of cogwheels as dynamic areas of track make sure this map is never boring to play on. One gripe I have about the track is the music. I feel like it would have been cool to have a more modern rendition of the Tick-Tock clock theme from Mario 64 as the background music for this track. I know that the music it has is the same as in DS and that the music in Mario 64 is just the slider theme reused, but come on, wouldn't it be cool to hear a full big band rendition of this music as the backing for this? Oh well, I can dream. Like Tick-Tock Clock, this track is really carried by the theming. I'm pretty sure the designers came up with the idea to make a disco/dance club theme track without really considering how it would work as a Mario Kart track, but lucky for them, it worked out pretty darn well. This is one of those tracks where I can remember pretty much every curve and obstacle on the whole track. The 0G in this course is used really well. It's some of the best in the game in my opinion, and each segment feels distinct and fresh. While the visuals are great, using color sparingly while still being bright and vibrant in contrast with the dark background, I think an underappreciated aspect of this track is the sound design. I love the little sounds your cart makes as it glides over this area of track, as well as the dramatic hits you hear as you race down these steps toward the ramp. In conclusion, neon piranha plants. The influences of BMX and monster truck rallies are clear here. Like Excite Bike Arena, which I'll get to in a bit, this track gives you plenty of opportunities to do tricks, which is the main draw of this track in my opinion. The visual theming of this track encourages you to have as much fun tricking off the ramps as you can, and it works wonders for making this track a mainstay of just about any Mario Kart session. The music is energetic and fits the visual aesthetic nicely as well, but I can't help think of Waluigi Pinball whenever I hear it. I kinda regret not doing the DLC tracks in this list now. Toad's Turnpike was a classic in Mario Kart 64, and in my opinion it retains that same status here. Everything from the downright ethereal music to the NPC cars and trucks to the highway at night setting makes this track feel unique and just a good time to play on. There's something just oddly nostalgic about this track and always makes me think of playing the older Mario Kart games with my friends back in the day. Whatever the case, this track just hits the spot. Yoshi's Circuit is the only Yoshi-shaped track in the game, and I think that's all I need to say about it, really. But seriously, this track is great. All the twists and turns feel pretty great, the set pieces and obstacles all add to the experience of the track without being out of place, and you can do some pretty incredible tech on this track if you got the skills. The music is cheerful, and the general aesthetic is just wonderful. The colors complement each other really well. And of course, the best part of the track is this waterfall trick. Hitting that thing feels like drinking a glass of ice water on a hot day. Wild Woods is one of those tracks I don't really think about a whole lot, but whenever I play it, I remember just how good it is. I used to disregard this track as one of the lower tier tracks, but the more I play it, the more I've grown to respect it. Part of that is because I'm really partial to the fantastical forest aesthetic, but really, I just have to respect how fun of a course it actually is. Like Electrodrome, this track uses zero gravity brilliantly. This is one of the few tracks where I feel like gravity is actually changing with the track. It can oftentimes feel like nothing really changes when the track flips upside down, and that's mostly down to the limitation of the camera always having to face the back of your cart using the same orientation, but in Wild Woods, you can really feel when you're going up or down at a steep angle. The aesthetics of this track are also a strong point. The relatively darker and more muted tones of this track make it feel more mystical and otherworldly, as does the music, which is in an odd time signature and predominantly uses wind and percussion instruments. Overall, very few downsides to this track. If I had to nitpick, it might feel a little bit constricted, but the sheer scale of the track more than makes up for it. Talk about metal, literally and figuratively. I can't think of a track that makes me feel more like I'm in the belly of the beast, in just a little bit over my head at the HQ of the forces of evil. From the way that the gate that guards your impending doom slowly opens at the very beginning of the track, to the chain mesh track suspended just mere feet above lava, to the intimidating mechanical parts of the castle, to the gosh darn giant fiery Mecha Bowser, this track is one of the few that I believe absolutely nail the theming. The track design is pretty good. I wouldn't say it knocks it out of the park in that regard, but again, the theming more than makes up for it. Also, the music is the definition of awesome. Metal-inspired electric guitar on top of an epic big band is an unprecedented touch that is just the cherry on top of this already impressive course. Wario gets a stadium, a gold mine, and now a whole mountain? Talk about capitalist greed. Mount Wario is one of the few tracks in this game that is not a loop. Rather, the track is split into 3 distinct sections, all of which are interesting and memorable in their own regard. The transitions between each section are also well thought out, all of them being part of a big ski resort. This track has the best use of the snow/ice aesthetic in my opinion. It really does feel like you're driving a go-kart through a ski resort. As crazy as that sounds, and even crazier how it works, the music, again, is great, and I love how each section has its own variation of the main theme. It also has one of the most iconic openings to a song in the entire game, the horns blaring as you fly through the air and you hit the snowy peak. Mount Wario is definitely one of the most memorable experiences in this game, and anyone who has the game and hasn't played through it yet is probably insane. Since this track is called Mute City, I thought it would be appropriate for the rest of the audio for this segment to be muted. Okay, just kidding. Nintendo is like a bad pet owner. They love teasing their little fans with tantalizing references to past games that the fans have been asking for a sequel to for years, and then not giving them anything else. That being said, Mute City is a great nod to this hopefully not dead, dormant series. They really nailed the feeling of speed with this track. Everything feels like it's moving at a breakneck pace, and like many of the other tracks, there's some pretty insane tech you can figure out if you're an experienced player. I love the little touches they added to this track, like the energy strips that give you coins as you drive over them, and the boost pads are being rethemed to look like they're from F-Zero. The backgrounds and the look and feel of the track itself just make my mouth water for a new F-Zero game, which I know is a laughable request, but hey, at least we have this. Rounding off the really theme-heavy tracks is Dragon Driftway. This one wasn't always one of my favorites, but it grew on me after a while, and now I have a real appreciation for it. One of the things that really strikes me about this track is the use of color. This track uses a lot of muted oranges and orangish grays, which I think are meant to represent the ancient Chinese themes of this track. From the paper lamps to the architectural design of the sheltered sections to the use of traditional Chinese instruments in the music, this track brings out the best of Chinese aesthetics. Also, the nod to Gobblegut as the titular dragon at the beginning of the track is a really nice touch. Any reference to Mario Galaxy is a win in my book. This track has a lot of twists and turns and opportunities to boost, which makes this track very interesting to play on most of the time. I'd recommend this one if you're looking for a fun multiplayer track, or just a track to gawk at the visuals of. I've seen a lot of people complain about this track, saying it's too slippery and too easy to fall off. While that's a valid point, my counter argument is this: get good. In all seriousness, I like this track a lot. The dystopian themes of a universe where Bowser wins and takes over the Mushroom Kingdom, transforming it into a futuristic sci-fi city, is just awesome to me. And I love the use of the classic cyberpunk blue and pink colors, contrasting with the foggy gray of the sky in the background. The buildings in the background and those that you race through are believably futuristic, yet have an industrial feel to them and really add to the aesthetic of the track. Also, the rain is so cool. Rain is my favorite weather, and I'm so glad there's at least one Mario Kart track where you get to race in the rain. The twists and the turns in this track are a little tight, which explains the complaints that arise from the NBC haters, as I call them. Maybe I should come up with a different acronym. Nevertheless, I feel like the extra challenge makes this track more fun to play on, and in my book, this track will always be a classic. The giant golden banana statue in the middle of this track implies that bananas are some sort of hero or deity in this universe. Just something to think about. Retro Studios designed a better jungle-themed track for Mario Kart 7 than Nintendo could ever come up with for 8. Yeah, I said it. This track is so Donkey Kong themed actually that it sometimes feels a little out of place, yet I can honestly say that it's one of the best tracks in the game. The whole thing is just designed so perfectly, from the sparing use of shortcuts, ramps, item boxes, and tight corners, to the unique elements like the screaming, whatever these things are, and the frog. It all comes together to make something so mathematically perfect that I don't really even know how to describe it. The Donkey Kong country music they used isn't the best, but it does the job, and this is another one of those tracks that I think hits it out of the park in the visual design department. And the style is unique enough that it kind of feels like a standalone Donkey Kong racing game, if that were to hypothetically exist. Overall, one of the most fun tracks in the game and an awesome gesture to the series that started it all for Mario. We're in the top 9 now, which means these tracks are what I consider to be the best of the best. If I were showing Mario Kart to someone for the first time, these are the tracks I would introduce them to the game with, and what better track to start this part of the list off with than Wario's Goldmine. This track and Moo Moo Meadows both are severely improved from their Wii counterparts, with the graphics and music seeing the most improvement in my opinion. I love the lens flare from the sun in the foggy sky, and just the way that all the little houses, mine shafts, and machinery look as set pieces. The varied inclines and widths of track you have to navigate help make it feel so very thrilling, and the little hops you can do around some of the curves are just so satisfying. The track design on this course makes it one of the most suspenseful tracks in the game. The threat of falling down into the pit under the flimsy looking minecart rails just feels so real on this track, and the minecarts being active parts of the track doesn't help alleviate that feeling. I love how bouncy the music is on this track. It really makes you feel like an old-timey western prospector who just found gold in the river, and the new technology makes it feel a lot fuller, I guess, than what the Wii could put out. I can't be the only one who wants to live in Toad Harbor, right? If you think I rank this track so high just because of the marina aesthetic, then you're right, but hear me out. Have you ever sat by a marina, dipping your hands in the water to feel the cool on your hands, watching boats come and go, some speeding by and others drifting slowly out to sea? The peace that you feel when you're there, just watching the world go by without a care in the world, that's what Toad Harbor means to me. I love the aesthetic of the port with all the sailboats, the quaint little seaside houses, even the crates of cargo. It all comes together to make a beautiful summery atmosphere that I come back and visit again and again, and one I would go to in real life if it were to exist. This track has plenty of other things going for it as well, namely the use of alternate paths. This track truly feels like one where you get to play it the way you want. You can play it dozens of times and it will be a different experience each time. And whether you take the high road or go low, it's a blast to play on with the varied turns and track elements, like the trolley that you pass every now and then, as well as the optional wall running segment. The music is the definition of sunny, with lively acoustic guitar chords under a funky electric guitar lead and cheerful synths. It makes you feel like the sun's high up in the sky as you ride around the coastline and through the town. Ribbon Road is just plain fun. It kind of stands out amongst peers, the fact that, if the background is to be believed, the whole thing takes place in a child's playroom, everything being made to look DIY with toys and blocks strewn about the track, and of course there's the track's namesake, the road being made of ribbon, and it all comes together to make an end product that just screams childhood. The track design is great, with my personal favorite part being the shortcuts, some of the most satisfying in the game to pull off in my opinion. The music is a paradise of funk with electric guitar and organ complementing the playful atmosphere. I don't really think to listen to it a lot when I'm not playing, but when I do hear it in-game, I remember just how good of a track it actually is. However, I still think it's best suited to be the background of this track, and in that regard, it does a perfect job. Okay, hear me out. I just thought of something brilliant. You know what would be a really cool Easter egg? If you could see the plane from Sunshine Airport go by in this track. I remember the first time I saw this track, I thought it was a remake of Sky Garden from Super Circuit. What we got ended up being even better. One thing I really love about this track is that you can imagine what all the textures you're racing on would feel like to touch. I also just really like the variety of the track in general, from a plant to a cloud to an airship, then through a thunderstorm, then back to the plant again. It's a roller coaster from start to finish and uses all of the tools at its disposal to its advantage. This is yet another track where you can feel the zero-G when it chooses to use it, which it doesn't overuse. The music is an obvious tribute to Mario Galaxy's Gusty Garden, which is a wonderful reference. The music in Galaxy is still unmatched in any Mario game to this day, in my opinion, so a reference to it in this track is just perfect. And the way that the music changes to just drum and electric guitar in the thundercloud is the definition of awesome. Man, this track is underappreciated. Boot up Mario Kart right now and show it some love. You can't play this track and not have a big smile on your face the whole time. Whether or not you've played Mario Kart Wii, you can't deny that some of the series' most iconic tracks come from that game, and Moo Moo Meadows is no exception. Like they did with Wario's Gold Mine, this track's aesthetics have been turned up to 11. This track just looks so pretty. I love the windmills, the barns, hills, trees, and of course those cute little cows. The song is one of my favorites in the entire game. Live fiddle is exactly what this track needed. The addition of flying segments and being able to boost off of Monty Mole's path of dug up dirt are some of the smartest additions to any retro track in the entire game. In my opinion, this track is one that needed more of a complete overhaul than a touch-up, which is exactly what they did, and it worked out amazingly. This track is a lot like Ribbon Road in that its whole purpose is just to be a fun track, and that's exactly what it is. It feels almost like a trick playground, and a really good one at that. There are no twists, just two 180-degree turns at each end of the track, but it doesn't need any. This isn't just any Mario Kart track, this is Excite Bike Arena. One of the main features of this track is how each section of track is different every time you play it. You'll never play this track the same way twice. Like Wario Stadium, the visual aspect of this track harkens to BMX, and this is definitely a biker's track, but that doesn't mean it's not fun to play on with karts. It's just that playing on it with bikes only takes it to a new level. Here's something really fun that you can do on this track. Play with a bike on it, then go into Mario Kart TV or watch your highlight reel at the end of the race and slow it down so that you can grab some cool screenshots. The song on this track is so freaking cool, probably my second favorite piece of music in the entire game. The combination of 8-bit synths and electric guitars along with the motifs from the original Excite Bike game on NES make the song, and by extension the chorus, a loving tribute to Excite Bike fans. The two of them that exist. Sorry. Okay, all of the other tie-in tracks got other words in their name, or at least they were the names of the tracks in their original games, so why is the Animal Crossing track just the name of its franchise? Despite the naming confusion, Animal Crossing is such a banger of a track. All the little nods to the Animal Crossing series are so cool, from the look of the trees, to the coins being changed to bells, to the villagers waving to you from the sidelines, to being able to find Mr. Rossetti digging up the track. The big one, though, is that there are 4 different variations of the track for each season, like in the original game. They don't change with the actual seasons, which makes sense because I guess it wouldn't really work for online, but it's still really cool because of the value of what you're getting. Basically, this is 4 tracks in one. I love how each season has its own soundtrack, each one being distinct from all the others, with different instrumentation and other variations in musical style. The track design, too, is excellent. Like many of the other tracks, there are distinct sections here that are all quite memorable. My favorite of which being the flying section where you get to pop the balloons for item boxes. Though more so for Animal Crossing fans, this is an excellent track that anyone can enjoy. Yeah, everyone point and laugh at the nerd, get it out of your system. For real though, Hyrule Circuit is perfection in a Mario Kart track. I can't think of a better way to pay tribute to such a revolutionary video game series in the form of a racetrack. Hyrule Circuit is a non-stop celebration of all things Zelda, from the obvious to the subtle, from the coins being changed to rupees, to the quote-unquote puzzle in the dungeon revealing a master sword you can trick off of, to the Hyrule Field-inspired grass sections, to Death Mountain, which you can just barely see in the distance. Everything is so bright and colorful, it reminds me of Skyward Sword if it was in the world of Ocarina of Time, and all the set pieces just make sense, like the Deku Babas near the end that replace the usual Piranha plants. The music is some of the best in the game. This song and Excitebike I never get tired of hearing. It's like every aspect of a Zelda game is represented in the motifs of the song. And the performance is just perfect. The guitars, horns, the drums, everything about it just screams epic. Also, as a little musical aside, much like in Animal Crossing, I love the little touch of the music when you pick up an item box being changed to the chest opening theme from Zelda. There just really isn't anything to complain about with this track. It's easy to pick up, but hard to master and figure out the best path through, find all the secrets and just appreciate all the little details. It really nails the balance between being easy for beginners to play and providing a challenge for Mario Kart veterans. You all already knew this one was going to be at the top. What could top the pure Nintendo magic this track produces? And that's exactly what this track encapsulates in my mind. Magic. You cross that starting line and you're instantly hit with a wave of joy that no other game could possibly produce. If you've played Mario Kart games before, you're hit with intense nostalgia, and if you haven't, you're already making memories that you'll look back on in the future and get nostalgic about. The more you look at it, the more of a spectacle this track becomes. The entire track is outlined with gold accents, and warm and cool colors engulf the entire area from different parts of the background. The golden lights from the city below contrast beautifully with the moonlit lake and the vast starry sky above. The fireworks shaping familiar characters and the flying train from which the toads throw coins at you are the cherry on top of the already beautiful cake that is the track itself. I would describe the visual presence of this track as climactic. In fact, there's a lot of aspects of this track that I would call climactic. One of the most prevalent, of course, is the music. There's a reason why there's countless videos on YouTube revolving around this song and the impact it has. The version you hear in 64 is among the most iconic iterations of the Rainbow Road theme composition-wise, and in 8 they went and made it the best song in the entire game. This song just feels like the true culmination of everything this game is. All the fun you were already having was leading to this moment of ecstasy. The little improvements and major change-up from 64 they incorporate are very much welcome. First of all, the elephant in the room. Making this track a 3-section track instead of a 3-lap track was the right move. The length of the track is perfect for a single lap, and a single lap is all you need to know that this track is total perfection. Secondly, the chain chomps add the perfect amount of spice to a track whose curves are already so satisfying to drift around. Thirdly, almost the entire track being in zero gravity is great. It gives the track design some room to twist and turn in ways that are fun to play and amazing to look at, and being able to boost off of other carts makes it even more fun. And last but certainly not least, the flying sections. The part of the beginning where you fly through the rings is great, but what I'm really talking about is the ending, where you jump into the air, deploy your wings, and swoop straight through the finish. That's what I call the perfect ending to the best track in Mario Kart 8, and I'd argue the best in Mario Kart history. So there you go, all 48 tracks from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, worst to best. This is a game that I've put a lot of time into, despite how bad at it I still am, and it means a lot to me. I've had so many great experiences playing this game with friends and family, and when it's with the right person, I can enjoy even the lowest tier tracks on this list. I probably have some opinions that you don't agree with, and that's okay, because in the end, it's not about what tracks are the best or worst, it's about how this game brings people together, and the experiences we have playing it, alone or with others. I'd love to hear about any experiences you've had with this game, or just anything you have to say about the list or the game in general. See ya!